Well, one thing we've noticed during the pandemic was that a lot of folks have been moving all around the country. So you might have an office in New York or in Chicago or San Francisco, and find out that your employees are now working from Utah or Georgia or Florida or Pennsylvania. And I think that companies are kind of waking up and trying to figure out what does this mean for their taxes if they now have a workforce that is very remote and getting and working from remote places.
Yeah, it's a very important question to ask, and it's something that I deal with every day. And I think that it's important to think of it from both the company's standpoint and from the employee's standpoint. Some people are focused on one and not the other, but it really does impact both the company and the employee. So from a company's perspective, they're taxed based on where they operate, and that can be dependent upon where their employees are located. And so to the extent that their workforce is now being spread out because of COVID into different remote jurisdictions, they need to be worried about as a company how their corporate income tax liability may be increased because of the presence of their employee in their workforce in different states. And then from an individual standpoint, the individual worker is taxed based on where they live, their residence, but also based on where they work. And so to the extent that they're commuting to a different state, they could be subjecting themselves to taxation in that other state. And that was a pre-COVID rule, right? That's always been the rule. But now COVID has heightened the situation to the point where you're seeing really wacky situations where states are saying, well, if you commuted to Massachusetts before COVID, and it's just because of COVID that you're not coming into Massachusetts anymore, we are going to deem you to be coming into Massachusetts and still tax you. And New Hampshire, for example, has filed a, a case in the Supreme Court against Massachusetts on this very issue. But then you've got states in various different camps. Some are following Massachusetts and some are following New Hampshire. And so you as an individual are left to try to sort it all out and figure out, well, where do I sit? Where do I physically sit, and where am I, digitally commuting to? And that can be
What kind of impact
daunting.
will that have on is it a significant impact? Is it lots of money? Or are we talking about just on the margins?
Yeah, so it can be extensive. I mean, it could be a material item for the company to the point where companies have relocated their headquarters and or opened up an office in a jurisdiction that's tax friendly and cause that to be a co-headquartered location where all their remote workers will report to, right? So they may be in a high tax jurisdiction with their regular headquarters, but they may open up a co-headquarters spot and have all their remote workers report to that office, and various derivations of those kinds of strategies are being done in order to manage the sort of nationwide taxation of that company, because as you know, we've got 50 states and every state's got a different tax regime, and some have very high taxes that are imposed on companies, and some states like Wyoming and Nevada don't have any taxes at all. So you can really sort of arbitrage tax rates in this situation as a company to manage your tax efficiencies.
You say states are getting more aggressive. So if I was an employer and I said, well, I'm just going to put my head in the sand, I'm not going to worry about this, and hope for the best. Do I still have some liability and problems ahead?
Yeah, I think this really manifests itself in the nature of the taxes that relate to these nexus issues that we're talking about, right? So that the nexus issues are very important, and they show up on the bottom line if you will, via your payroll withholding obligations, and in some instance, in other instances, based on your sales tax nexus and where you need to collect sales tax. And why do I say that those are important to the bottom line of the company? And that is because I'm not talking about the actual bottom line of your tax return or your bottom line of your balance sheet. I'm talking about what people really care about, and that is their personal liability and potential criminal liability for failure to comply with taxes. Most taxes, okay, you don't pay them, you can file an amended return and get around it. With respect to what these taxes involve, which are called trust fund taxes, or taxes in which you have a fiduciary obligation to withhold on behalf of a state, there is heightened scrutiny with respect to those taxes. So if you just, as you said, blow them off and say, oh, well, I don't need to worry about it, you could be under withholding with respect to those employees.
What's a good best practice in terms of, finding out about this if I'm an employer and I'm really not sure? I talk to my folks on Zoom. I can't tell if they're in their office or where they're at home and what their home looks like. What do you think is a good strategy for me to try to get my arms around this?
Well, I think communication is always the best strategy. And when you attach a dollar sign to your communication, it's always sort of helps it, reviewed and digested by the recipient. And so what I would say is, hey, employee, there might be a chance that you, we're over withholding from you because if you have moved to a jurisdiction where the rate is lower, we may need to lower your withholding. You'll get more cash in your pocket. And more importantly, if you don't tell us, you may end up having to file in taxes in two different places. And as an administrative burden, that's a good reason enough to let us know what the perfect information is. So a communication to your workforce that says, hey, look, we're all in this together. We want to report correctly so we don't have to report twice, and that you get the benefit of, potentially having a lower withholding tax.